This episode of Bright Hearth is brought to you by the Kingsridge Elderberry, QP Goat Soap, Backwards Planning Financial, Private Family Banking, and by our supporters at patreon.com. At a fundamental level, the only way that we can eat well is by being well eaters. And the only way that we can be well eaters is by being made well through the blood of Christ. Remembering this is so central to our family tables. There is no unclean food. There are only unclean people. Our tables are a place of gratitude. We used to be unclean, and now we are clean. But it is still possible to break fellowship with Christ in how we approach our food and how we behave around our tables. Here are a few ways to do that. First, we can be fearful. We can spend our time fretting over what we are eating. We can worry that food is one big trap waiting to trick us into cancer, into heart disease, into pasty children with unhealthy guts and developmental problems. This is like the disciples standing on the boat worrying over the waves in the wind. Jesus rebuked them when they finally woke him. "O ye of little faith, did you think that this was a problem for me?" Christian mothers may not be fearful about food because Jesus is our Savior. He is with us, and he does not want us to fear. Second, we can be disobedient. We can pursue food interests that our husband does not want us to. We can break fellowship with our husband if he buys our children donuts. We could get so into health food that our husband doesn't feel welcome at his own table. In other words, we could get so consumed with the healthy food that we are no longer healthy people. We could, in pursuit of health, break fellowship with our husbands as well as with Jesus. Third, we can use food to separate us from others. When we say that we cannot eat with people because of the nature of the food, we are behaving like the Pharisees and not like Jesus. Jesus prioritized table fellowship over food. We relish the prestige of being unable to partake in someone else's food. That was not the part played by our Savior, and that is not a part that he admired. You should abhor the thought of using food to identify yourself. What identifies you is the blood of Christ. The Pharisees found themselves abstaining from a table at which Christ was eating. Because they were cleaner than that, make sure that you are not standing with them looking down on the fellowship around anyone's table. Fourth, we can look at food to save us from the fall. We are all fallen creatures in corruptible bodies. Sin did that, not food. I often hear people bringing up the wholesome past before people used to have illnesses that are common now. The truth is that we all die, and we all die of something. Before pesticides and growth hormones and fertilizers were introduced, people were dying. Perhaps they were dying from wholesomeness, but somehow I doubt that. There is also a lot of consternation about the number of sick people now. Jesus said that he did not come for the healthy, but for the sick. And when he came, he did not come with a juice fast. Jesus Christ was the solution. And don't try to say that he was talking about just the spiritually sick people. He was known for healing physical problems. He came as a savior of mankind, body and soul. Mankind cannot dig out of the consequences of the fall. We can only be carried out. Jesus did that. Healthy guts cannot. Excerpt from Fit to Burst by Rachel Jankovic.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bright Hearth. Brian here, joined by my lovely wife, Lexy, and Alfred. Alfred, say hi to the people.
Oh, he will.
He's been fussing a little bit because Mama is committing the cardinal sin.
What?
Do you know what the cardinal sin is?
Well, I fed him.
Mm-hmm.
I changed him.
Yep.
I snuggled him and fed him again.
Still,
Gave him Italian sausage.
It's not
What
enough.
is it?
Cardinal sin is not holding him continually every moment of his life.
Well, he was kicking me. I was trying to. He's wiggly.
He is wiggly, and he's huge, guys. I mean, he's enormous. He's actually weighs more than Lexy already. It's unbelievable, I know, but yeah, he does. He weighs 163 pounds. I'm just kidding. Oh, well, guys, today we have hopefully a great episode for you, a really good question that's very relevant. It's one that we
get this so much.
Yeah, we get it a lot, and it's also, I think, a good opportunity to talk about some ditches that run along the road of many of the good things we talk about here on Bright Hearth. So we've got this question for you, and after we discuss the question, we have a surprise for you guys. A surprise, an announcement.
A cookie?
A cookie.
Did you get me ice cream?
Do you have a cookie? I could use a cookie right now. No, we do not have cookies for you listeners because this is a podcast. Like, we can't actually deliver cookies through your lightning port or whatever you're using, whatever the Android equivalent is. Anyway, we got a great question and a surprise for you, so listen through to the end. And, man, I have something that, let's just say that it made my friend Eric cry today in my office.
Today again?
The surprise.
Really?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, man.
All right, here we go. So our question today is this. I've noticed that certain food fads seem to run like wildfire through churches and homes. Fads that come with hyper-restrictive diet preferences. How should Christians think about these things? What about hospitality? That's our question for the night. And it's got a lot in it. I mean, there's a lot of places we could go, and a lot of caveats. Maybe up front, let me just say, clear up some ways that people might be unnecessarily offended or misunderstand. Good
idea.
And just say, like, all the caveats. Here's a caveat. If you have a genuine food allergy and we say something, we're not we're making fun of food fussing, we're not talking about you.
We're talking about genuine food allergies, not what Pastor Wilson calls boutique allergies.
Yeah, sure. If you are doing an elimination diet for a really, like an actual real, like you've got issues you're trying to figure out in your family or children, we're not talking about you. What else? What am I missing? Food is really important. The quality of food is really important. Food is a great way to love people. You should care, and you should have good standards.
Yeah.
So all that up front here. Mm-hmm. Maybe let's talk about that again. Actually, at first here. I think that's a good way to frame it. Let's talk about food standards. Why is it good to have good food standards? And why is that something that, like you as a worker at home, like Titus 2, you're a worker at home. Mm-hmm. Proverbs 31, 10 through the end of the chapter, the Proverbs 31 woman, it talks about food several times and bringing merchant ships from afar to feed her family and her table. So why is it good? Let's start there. Why is it good to have food standards, and how does that relate to your work as a homemaker?
Well, I think of it all vocationally. I'm still debating some of this. But vocationally, I think it is a moral issue. Maybe you can correct me on this. Consumption of food is not a moral issue. We can talk about 1 Timothy at some point, but vocationally, I think there is an issue once you have a certain amount of information. Mm-hmm. At least I feel strongly that there are better ways to feed people than others. In the same way you would apply it to a teacher or to a banker or a scientist, there are better ways to do your job than other ways. Mm-hmm. That all comes with a learning curve, though. It all comes with the tools you have on hand, the number of resources you have. So it's not unreasonable. It's just that because truth, goodness, and beauty is a real thing, there is real quality to be pursued in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. And unless you be tripped up by the statement that food consumption is a moral issue, we obviously have passages in the New Testament that are, food for the stomach, stomach for the food. God will destroy both one and the other. We have lots of passages that deal about not being divisive around food. In the particular context, a lot of times it's talking about eating meat sacrificed to idols or not. And that's not necessarily first about the nutritional value of the food, obviously. It's about a separate moral element. But I think it's pretty clear that food... Hey, Alfred. He's like... cardinal sin. Okay, cardinal sin fixed. Alfie's being held. It's obvious once you think about it that food on some level consumption is a moral issue, and how you feed your people. Think about it like this. If you knowingly fed your children a diet that you knew would malnourish them and lead them to extreme health issues, and you had the means, like you're not talking about you're in Africa, there's no food anywhere. I mean, like you had the means and you chose to do that.
Yeah.
You'd obviously be sinning.
Yeah.
You'd be sinning.
Well, and that's where, vocationally, I genuinely know the difference when I'm being lazy and not wanting to cook versus willing to put a little extra time and effort into it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other things, I don't want the government telling me what to eat and not to eat. I don't want them being able to hide things in my food. I think there's issues of justice and God's law at stake as well, but still it's not the actual eating, the consuming is not...
It's not morally
a
neutral.
Moral. Well, I am saying I think it is, though. I'm saying that I'm looking at it as two categories: consumption of food versus vocationally.
Oh, yeah.
So I think
it's not a morally neutral issue. There's obviously ways you can sin in any side.
That's what I was going to say.
But they're different categories.
You could go both ways. Yeah.
Okay,
so that's why I pursue it in my home.
Yeah.
Not because I think I'm genuinely going to earn another jewel in my crown in heaven because of it.
Everybody,
or I'm better than other people because of it.
Yeah. Everybody's going to die. Everybody's going to die of something. And you're not going to achieve immortality or righteousness through eating. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not what goes into the body that defiles a man. It's what comes out of his heart. Jesus made that very explicitly clear.
discover the gentle touch of QP Goat Soap.
That's right, she said goat soap. Introducing QP Goat Soap, a Christian, homeschooling, family-owned business with a great story behind it. One that really captures the heart of what we're all about here on Bright Hearth. For Quinn Pittman's 9th birthday, he convinced his parents to get him a pair of Nigerian dwarf goats, known for their sweet and creamy milk. Quinn not only excelled at caring for his small flock, it's since grown. Now an enterprising 16-year-old, Quinn and his family makes high-quality soaps that will leave your skin feeling soft and silky smooth from the increase of his herd.
Head over to qpgoatsoap.com or tap on the link in the description of this episode to pick up a pack of his handcrafted soap today. Available in men's, women's, seasonal scents, and more, you'll love this family-owned business. And even better, use the code BRIGHT10 at checkout for a discount on your order. You can find that code in the description as well.
That's right, and that code is all lowercase, BRIGHT10, BRIGHT10 at checkout for a discount on your order. Do you desire to be shrewd financially for your family? It takes wisdom and dedication to build and pass on personal wealth, as mature, responsible leaders must.
Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial is at your side to integrate investments, debt, insurance, tax strategies, and legacy planning in a holistic approach.
He coaches his clients to act wisely with the resources God expects us to turn a profit on, to love our children and grandchildren well.
Tap on the link to his website in the description and contact him to get started.
Or visit him directly at backwardspanningfinancial.com. So when we're thinking about food culture first and having high standards, and some of the main principles that we're always trying to keep in front of us is that, so Lexy's duty as a homemaker, my duty as a provider in our home, is that we want to adorn the gospel. We want to love our children well. We want our table to be a place of joy, a thick culture, a culture of feasting, and a culture where people are putting their backs into it, basically. Right, where everybody is putting their back into the work and the duties God has put in front of them. And for the homemaker, that means that one of the biggest rhythms of life that her life is going to be built around is putting food on the table 3 times a day or 2 times a day or however your schedule works. She's going to be feeding people, and that's going to be very important. So thick culture, yes. Good food standards, yes. We're absolutely pro all of that, putting your back into it. But the questioner is asking about sometimes these food, they call them food fads, and sometimes they are food fads. And then sometimes they're also things that are probably not necessarily like fad first. They might be serious, like actually serious dietary theories and hormonal theories, and asking like, why are a lot of people sick in our culture today, or disease seems to be, so I don't want to just easily dismiss something like the carnivore investigation, like what would happen, or even if we just said what would happen if we ate more meat, and
Yeah.
So those are serious questions that are worth serious. Like, I don't want to make fun of those.
No, obviously we like
dismiss
talking
them.
about this stuff.
Yeah, those are very important. But it is true that sometimes these kind of food trends can lead to very hyper-restrictive diet preferences, and they can end up making things like hospitality very difficult. They can make things like, church potluck very difficult. Eating together.
breaking of fellowship.
And eating together is such a central part of fellowship. God made it that way. Think of Psalm 23. The end of that psalm is that he will prepare a table for you in the presence of your enemies. Christ instituted a meal as one of the 2 sacraments of the church, where we eat together. There's a lot of instruction about fellowship around tables, where Paul opposed Peter to his face because he wasn't eating with the Jews when he was or with the Gentiles in certain company. So food is not a neutral issue in the sense of the fellowship that happens around the table. God intended for food to be a central place of fellowship. So where are some lines, do you think? How can Christians be thinking about something like, maybe you're going to pursue a diet that's very restrictive? And where does that fit into hospitality? And what are some ditches maybe? What are some principles to think of when you're looking at either those in your own family or a friend or somebody else in the church?
Yeah, one would be not breaking a fellowship. And so I think you can do this a few ways. You can do it where either you just eat before, which is sad.
Yeah.
And you don't eat with people, which is very sad. Or you just bring something that you can eat and you enjoy fellowshipping with other people. I would tend to lean towards that.
Yeah.
when it comes to like large group setting. I think it would be really important. Something that I see a lot is like, we do have a lot of friends that have used a lot of these diets in really cool and awesome ways. Thanks, buddy.
Oh, we got a big spit up. Big spit up
Hold
there.
on. I think it can be important for a husband to set like a time limit in some ways. Like, okay, let's give this a good shot for 6 months. If we see some improvements, that's great. We'll stick with it or figure out how to, make this our new normal. If this starts going deeper and deeper in some ways in 6 months and it's not clearing up issues and we're overly anxious now, we're going to stop that. Yeah. So I think that would be really wise to like have your eyes open going into it, if that makes sense.
No, that's a great point.
Then when thinking of like hospitality and not just large group, like going to someone's house, I would, number one, you said this recently. I think it was you. You said something about people shouldn't expect others to get a PhD in their food diet before going to their house.
I think a very important principle is that if you have a hyper-restrictive diet, you need to put the responsibility
on
for
yourself.
maintaining that and maintaining hospitality on you, not on everybody else.
I think this is just, it's very obvious when it comes to food, but there's a lot of other little areas too, and myself included, because this is just the cultural streams we live in. We don't know how to be guests in one another's homes anymore. So, but if it were me and I was being restrictive, then I would just say, like, I'm just going to bring dinner for myself. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, guys, is like, if it really is a genuine anaphylactic allergy, you're going to care enough to just bring your own food.
Yeah.
Or just be kind to the person about it, but not, the thing I said to you recently was, like, my kids don't get to treat me like a short order chef.
Right. Yeah.
So, and you have to understand that going to someone else's house, you don't know, like I think about, you have given me a set of a few meals for our parish nights that we're using over and over again. And you've said, I want you to stick to this. And because it's hard for us right now in the season we're in to have regular hospitality, but it is one way that it's become manageable. Therefore, if you interject a bunch of extra, well, you can't eat this, you can't do that, you can't do that on top of it, it then becomes unmaintainable to me and to us as a family.
Yeah. And so if you have a really, like, let's say that you are on an unusual diet, carnivore or GAPS or something like that, and you're pursuing it for a good reason, and you've gotten permission from your husband, or you guys are doing this together, you have some guidelines to where you're making sure you're not giving into the anxiety that food can often, food can be an issue where I've seen this amongst men, but I've especially seen it amongst ladies, where it becomes such an anxious thing that they're shortening their lives radically by being wildly anxious about eating healthy.
I really do want to talk about 1 Timothy at some point, but I just want to say that there are studies that show, like, if you can sit and give thanks over something, you're digesting that way better than anything else.
Yeah, thankfulness. But the main thing, but I was going to say, all that said, if you have some legitimate reason that you have a very restrictive diet, or you're pursuing some sort of total elimination diet, then you should go out of your way in whatever means works in the context to make sure that it's on you and not the people giving hospitality. So maybe bring something with you, explain ahead of time, hey, I'm really not trying to be rude. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this inflammation, this issue. I'm doing an elimination diet. I don't want to put any weird thing on you. I'm going to bring my own food.
Yeah.
It's not an insult. We really want a fellowship. We don't want it to be a thing that divides.
And we have friends that do this.
Absolutely.
And
no big deal.
We love hanging out with them, and it's not a problem.
Yeah. Think, and this can be really complex. Like, think about a mom nursing an infant. A lot of times you have moms all of a sudden trying to chase down really things that are very disruptive to life, like the child being completely sick or colicky, throwing like reflux, and you're trying to chase down, is there a dietary thing that's causing this? And it can mean mom has to eat restrictively. There's genuine reasons for some of this. So I would also say, as a principle, love your neighbor as yourself. So before you kind of scoff or talk behind someone's back about their fad diet or whatever it is, like, be charitable to them. Make sure that you're not getting offended overly if somebody, maybe they are doing something that they shouldn't be, or they're not handling something graciously, but you go out of your way, even on the other side of the equation, as someone who doesn't have the restrictive diet, to be Alfred's just shredding a paper towel everywhere. It's beautiful, Bubba. Good job. He's totally absorbed. But This is a charity in both directions kind of issue.
Yeah.
You're each trying to die to yourself for the sake of the other.
Yeah.
Not be offended easily.
The thing you've told me when it comes to like how to cook for people, you've said do what's in reason. Like reasonable is the word you've given me. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we can be
reasonable. Doesn't mean I need to panic all week.
Yeah.
But
yeah. What was the First Timothy reference that you wanted to talk about as well? I think that'd be a good one to bring up.
Hold on. Okay, so 1 Timothy chapter 4 says, "Now the Spirit expressly says that in later times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons, through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and require abstinence from foods that God created, to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, for it is made holy by the word of God and prayer." Okay, so there's a few things that have always really stood out to me about that passage. The first one is that there seems to be something about abstaining from certain foods that is connected to demons, which should not be passed over lightly. The second one is that it says, let's see, what verse is it?
Alfred.
So foods that are created to be received with thanksgiving, to be received by those who believe and know the truth. So food is to be received by Christians with thanksgiving.
Yes.
By Christians specifically, we're to receive food.
Yes.
So that should also be a warning to us and at least give us pause when there are certain things that we're just flat out rejecting. And by the way, well, never mind. I'm not going to mention that right now. The last thing is that it's when we receive it with prayer and thanksgiving that it is sanctified and set apart for us. So that should be an encouragement instead of cutting until you're eating nothing but yucky chicken breasts.
Start with your thanksgiving, start with your spirit, start with your attitude. How are you receiving? Are you receiving with joy and thankfulness?
Yes.
Are you praying over your food? And I know you guys are like, some of you really care about health stuff. We do too. And you're thinking like, yeah, but that's all good. But what about like the gluten? What about this? What about that? What about the modern grain? But what we're saying is not that other stuff's not important, but start at the most important thing because God says that it actually does something.
Yes. And if I was on a restricted diet, well, I'm not. And I don't go on those for this reason because I have in the past.
Yeah.
And I have a history of this and I won't let myself do it.
Yeah.
So if I ever was on it for whatever reason, I probably wouldn't bring it up. And for the most part, I would eat what was put in front of me.
So let's make a distinction here. I think there's a category that's really important to understand when you're thinking about food and restrictions. When we say very restrictive diet, I would say neither of us are actually talking about things like, let's try to cut industrial seed oils out of our diet, or let's try to stop eating everything ready-made from a McDonald's bag.
Yeah.
We're actually more talking about stuff like before you throw out a whole food group.
Yes. Yeah.
Before you say like, I know a lot of you are really into carnivore, and that's fine. I've got friends who are as well, and so this really isn't like a dig against whether carnivore is effective or not. But I would just say before you go on something like as restrictive as paleo or carnivore, I would say be take care because trends will pop up. People will claim that there's this like miracle diet. That it will just, if you just go on carnivore, it will reduce all your inflammation. Everything will be healed. You'll be fine. Like all of your diseases will go away and you'll just be like, it's kind of almost magical. And I'm not saying everybody who talks about it that way or makes those claims, but it's really easy to get swept up into a trend or a dietary movement and then end up doing it without actually having done the reading. Because you're just being swept up in a trend, and you haven't really stopped and thought, like, particularly, I would say for women, a lot of these diets are can be very dangerous for women in particular, hormonally. Lexi's done a lot of reading and investigation on these kinds of things as well. It always discourages women in particular from being quick to be like, I'm just going to go on carnivore.
Yeah, and before I really knew of a lot of these restrictive diets, coming out of veganism, I just knew that scripture included all the food groups and that was enough for me.
Yeah, it's like meat, milk,
is
honey.
Still why it's enough for me to eat
bread.
Everything.
Yeah, it's like meat, milk, honey, bread. You're going to eat all the stuff even in kosher law, you're eating. Now, I mean, even more so with kosher law being a shadow that's given way to the substance in Christ in the nations in gathering into the people of God. So it's important that you think like, I think there's a distinction to be made there when you're like, okay, before I cut out a whole food group, I think that's different from saying like, let's take a look at how modern grain is. Let's try to introduce more ancient grains, or let's try to think about how our meat is produced and what kind of things are happening in the process of large-scale slaughter and what things are happening in industrial feedlot and things like that. Those are actually, in my opinion, different questions. Those are more quality and the ethics of the supply chain.
Yeah.
Than and like also shady government additives, like making it's so classic of the government to be like, hey, raw milk, illegal. But industrial machine oils, we are now going to put in every food ever, anywhere. And it's like, clearly they're in bed with big. So guys, we're not saying, you know us.
And I think too,
we're not
there's
saying
a
don't
difference.
have food standards.
Like we have certain friends that are on, we have a lot of friends. A lot of people have been helped by GAPS at our church.
Yeah.
But pretty much all of those people understand that the end goal of GAPS is to be able to digest all the food groups.
Right.
It's not to forever cut out a food group until the day they die.
Just in a napkin sketch, what is GAPS? We've mentioned it a couple
gut
times.
and psychology syndrome. It's a diet essentially that it is like an elimination diet where you're kind of trying to heal your stomach.
Yeah.
Your gut lining. And there's a lot of connections. It's called gut and psychology syndrome because we're finding out basically that like 90% of our brain is actually in our gut lining. And so things like medicine and crap food and pesticides and vaccines can wreck your lining. And so you hear the gut lining of your gut, you hear it called leaky gut. And you start out with like broth for a couple of days, and then you slowly introduce different foods into your system that are easy to digest and getting harder and harder to digest.
Yeah.
So that you can kind of figure out what is causing a flare up in your body. But the ultimate goal long term is that you would be able to digest and use food efficiently. So the problem with something like this, though, is what happens in a fallen world when you just might have toots when you eat beans for the rest of your life. Like
people are looking for like where I feel they start to get so obsessed about how they feel after eating every single thing.
Yeah.
And they get anxious. And then there's such thing as placebos and psychosomatic.
Well, and something I was thinking about today, I saw this, I don't even remember. One of my really good friends sent me this thing on Instagram where the lady was basically saying like, I'm seeing people, and this was from a pro-metabolic perspective, people getting more and more restrictive, chasing down things here and there. And it's causing more and more anxiety. And they're forgetting that like stress and cortisol and anxiety in the body is so bad for you. And it made me think of that. Maybe you could Google it. The verse in Ecclesiastes that says, wise is the man who holds on to one thing and doesn't let go of the other. You know what I'm talking about? So I was thinking about how I just really do think there is wisdom in being able to, yes, hold good, high food standards, maybe even hold a diet that you feel great on. Like I genuinely do not feel good on fast food. My family just doesn't eat fast food.
Yeah. And
we don't do that. But at the same time, if I showed up at someone's house for dinner and I found out they were ordering us Pizza Hut for dinner, I would eat the Pizza Hut and I would give thanks for it and I would thank them for getting me pizza.
And that's the big point is that, okay, category distinction between eliminating whole food groups and pursuing things like understanding the quality of ingredients and the processes and things that genuinely are like PUFAs and seed oils, guys, they're terrible for you. And it's pretty much, we know this. So I think there's a distinction between those two pursuits on a principle level, but here's the big one. Don't break fellowship over the Pizza Hut that's put in front of you. Don't shame the family that invited you over to their home. Don't be rude. Don't be passive aggressive. Don't be snooty. In fact, give thanks to it, particularly. Eat the food put in front of you and praise the Lord. And trust that God is able to, as you follow the most important thing first, that he's able to bless. It reminds me of, I tell people this all the time in our church and all over the place. You've probably heard me say it, that, okay, do you want to live a long life?
Yes, I knew.
Honor your father and mother.
Yeah.
Because that's what Paul says. Like, it's the first command with a promise. Honor your father and mother that you may live long in the land. And what we want to do is we want to boil everything down to a physical machine where it's all input, output. I input the right foods, the right medicines, the right supplements, the right exercise, and that's what guarantees me a long life.
Yeah.
And God says, no, I ordain the end and the beginning. And you could do all those things and die in your 30s, or you could be the guy that's never even heard of what a seed oil is, and he's eating Cheetos and Dr. Pepper every day, and he lives to 85. And we're gonna find out, guys, in heaven probably that some of those guys live to 85 because they honored their mother and father a whole lot.
Which is why I think it's really important in the opening section where Rachel Jankovic says that Jesus came proclaiming the gospel from death to resurrection, not a juice fast. I think it's really important because in the moment when you are starting to fret over something, you have one of two options. Because like you're saying, now I understand what you meant. It's not morally neutral. You have one of two options. You can start sinning with the food that's in front of you, or you can give thanks and obey and eat the food in front of you. So it's important that we really value having keeping short accounts with others over our diet.
Yeah.
Keeping short accounts with the Lord, first of all, because it's the sin that got us in this place in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you're eating, I'll put me out there, like I have all your raw milk with all your raw eggs and the perfect maple syrup with yummy Celtic sea salt specifically because it has a kind of magnesium that I need.
And everything's fermented.
Yes.
All the time.
Well, that's debatable nowadays, but.
Okay. There's a lot of fermented things in our life.
But I could be eating the right thing, but sinning with it.
Yeah. It's worthless.
It is 100% worthless.
It's worthless. If you are an angry, bitter mom who's lecturing your husband, nagging him, your kids hate to eat with you because everybody feels like they're under examination.
That was the other thing I did want to say too, because I really do feel strongly about wives being hospitable to their husbands. If you are on a certain diet, I remember this with when I wanted to eat vegan. I didn't make you everything you wanted to have, but I think it's important that if your husband wants something homemade and he wants you to make it for him and you won't eat it, you should make it for him because he's going to go get it otherwise.
Yeah, I ate meat the whole time.
Yeah.
And now if you transported Brian today back in time with a time machine, Lexi wouldn't have been vegan anymore because I would have said, babe, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to be vegan.
Well, just to be clear, we had doctors telling us to do this.
Yeah,
Hence why we don't listen to doctors very often.
Yeah, it was all like understandable. A lot of us have been through our normie phase.
You helped me through that.
It was, and we learned a lot, and actually Joe Rigney's book, there was a lot that helped.
It was a very big life change for us, but I really do think it's important. Like if you want to do something, my friend Crystal taught me this. It did help having Crystal when I was such a young mom. She was really into Trim Healthy Mama, but she would always cook the meals that her husband liked.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, okay, that's good advice. You need to be hospitable to your husband in your home. Yeah. You don't want him not wanting to be at your table.
And your children, you don't want your children to grow up where it's like, mama's food is all yucky and it's all health food that's not good, doesn't taste good, and it's super restrictive, and she's always nagging me about it. Because guess what, guys? Your kids will grow up and they'll start sneaking very early. They'll start trying to figure out ways to barter for their Chips Ahoy at the lunch table at school, or they'll figure out a way. And you won't have their heart when they grow up because there won't be any love attached. They won't see how this standard that you have is properly rooted in God's character and in his law, and his law is summed up in love. So if your food law is resulting in everybody experiencing from you nagginess, bitterness, anxiety, and hatred, that's what they're experiencing. It's not fulfilling. It's not law fulfilling food love.
It's like that principle of do not boil the child in the mother's
milk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were actually, I looked up that verse. It was Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 16 to 18. It says, do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. That was the basic idea of, and I think that was the NIV that I'm reading for because I just Googled it. The basic idea is that, of course, Solomon's not actually saying that there's such thing as being too wise, but he's saying that people, when they go into these extremes like over scrupulousness, trying to be more righteous, we actually end up being wicked. We end up being absolutely wicked. Like, grasp onto wisdom, but have moderation and be skeptical of your law adding. Because what you'll often find is that you end up in what Paul's rebuking in Colossians 2 when he says, like the ascetic is always saying, do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, referring to the things that perish as they're used, like food. These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but he says they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. Our sponsor, Private Family Banking Partners, is on a mission to help Christians live out the Dominion Mandate by making a stealth-like move away from the mainstream banks and into their own privatized banking system. This innovative system is designed to guarantee uninterrupted compound interest and tax-free growth without exposure to typical stock market risks. To join this growing community that is already building wealth into future generations and converting post-mill talk into post-mill action, contact Private Family Banking Partner Chuck DeLateranti at his email, chuck@privatefamilybanking.com. That's chuck@privatefamilybanking.com.
To set up an appointment and to receive a free copy of Chuck's new book, Protect Your Money Now, How to Build Multi-Generational Wealth Outside of Wall Street and Avoid the Coming Banking Meltdown, go to the links in the show notes below.
Did you know that fresh American black elderberries are naturally high in phosphorus, vitamin A, vitamin B6, and vitamin C, as well as many anthocyanins that serve as antioxidants? Regular supplementation with elderberry extracts has been shown to decrease chance of influenza and lessen cold duration and symptoms.
The Kings Ridge fresh frozen elderberries are hand-picked, destemmed, washed, and quickly frozen at their family farm in east central Indiana. Their whole operation is designed around maximizing freshness and antioxidant content of their berries. Trevor and Autumn truly hope that their elderberry syrup and fresh frozen elderberries bless your family this cold and flu season.
Don't buy dried European elderberries and support the global economic agenda. Visit tkrfarm.com and purchase your elderberry needs from the Kings Ridge elderberries. And that link is in the description for you.
In the indulgence of the flesh might mean you sitting there anxious about dinner at a friend's house.
Yeah.
Not just lust of the flesh or
Right.
like obvious envy and like being a loudmouth woman. It might be quiet anxiety in your heart that is the
Yes.
lust of your flesh acting out.
My husband's going to die. He's going to
Yes.
get this. He ate at Taco Bell this week. You know what's going to actually kill him really quick is if you nag him about it
Yeah.
constantly. It'll kill your marriage. It'll kill your love. So this is a balancing act. Have good standards, pursue good standards, love your people with food, make a thick culture. But the best way to do that is to make really tasty, good food. To get the skill.
It's true.
So you can make really tasty. And the thing is, like, we know this, making a good steak is super good for you. It's tasty. Making a really good loaf of bread or honey butter. These are tasty, delicious things kids love too. It's not that you have a choice between cardboard and health.
No.
Or like good. God made good tasting food healthy.
I think,
like, don't be so scared of sugar, for example, is another thing. Like,
I 100% do not believe sugar is the bad guy.
Sugar's not the bad guy. Like, we've got a little repeat.
That's kind of what I did do
boys, but
when we started this was like, what are the junk foods we like and how can I figure out how to make them?
yeah, Lexi's got buys these Skittles every once in a while that are like these.
That's true. Or like just
They're really good.
just find a healthier version of them.
A lot of the
Unreal
trad,
brand. We like the Unreal candy.
the crunchy the crunchy Instagram ones. They always talk about swaps.
Oh yeah.
Swaps.
I guess
Swap
they
this
do.
for this. And that's actually, it's funny, but it's 100% true. You can often, the point though I'm making is that you don't have the choice between cardboard and health, or you really just, it's a skill. Learn how to cook good tasting food.
Yeah.
Put your back into it. Find out what your great grandma cooked, because she fed probably 15 boys and did it with $8 a month or something crazy. And so figure that stuff out. And I think you'll be good. Any last thoughts or principles you want to drive in before I give them our big surprise?
No, I just, if you can be low maintenance in some ways, it's going to improve your quality of life.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, guys, thanks for that question. Big surprise.
Oh, we're not done. I forgot.
If you follow me on Twitter or whatever, this is actually not a surprise. But today, actually at midnight today, as you're listening to this, Monday, October 16th, well, at least that's when it came out, I released a new 7-song EP.
Yay!
Hearth songs.
It's been almost a year, too, since you told me about it. I was thinking about that today.
Yes. Tell them more about it, babe.
This was an album that you wrote for me for my birthday last year.
Yes, I recorded iPhone demos of it last year and told Lexi that I was going to make these songs.
And I basically sat on the couch all day on my birthday crying.
She just cried. And now Eric
I was
cries.
also very pregnant, so
Yeah.
it's very sweet though.
She just goes, like, it's so sweet.
I know
though.
I couldn't say anything else. I just kept crying saying it's so sweet.
The idea of the album's called Hearth Songs. You can go find it anywhere music is released, basically Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever, Amazon. And it is a 7-song EP of original songs that I wrote with the goal of basically displaying the beauty and the glory of ordinary Christian life, marriage. So I have, you'll find Daphne's song on there for my little daffodil, Winnie's song. There's a song called Old Neptune, He's Roaring, which is a song for my sons and your sons as well. And there is a song at the end called Drawing Blood that is a quite sad song. It's about like handling. We've had a season of our church with just lots of painful
Child
loss. We've buried several children and had infertility issues. So that song came out of some of those things and kind of suffering with our people and experiencing loss, but hopefully ending with a Psalm 126 note of hope and joy. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah.
And let me know if you want us to do this. Let me say this. On Twitter or Facebook, if you want, I've thought about Lexy and I sitting down maybe in front of a camera and doing a YouTube video where we like play a part of the song and kind of explain some of it, because there's elements of these songs that are very personal in there, like funny stories from. There's one part of a song, the 5th song on the album is called, or the 6th, I can't remember. It's called "Honey Wild and Manna Sweet," or the song formerly known as 17. And
You changed it?
yeah, you can still call it 17.
I don't know, man.
Well,
At least no.
I should have run it.
Yeah, you should have.
Run it
Like
by
how when you changed the Bright Hearth intro music for a few weeks there.
Oh,
and I was like,
And she was
no,
like,
you're
"Don't
not."
you change that?" Golly.
There's very few things that I'm picky
know.
over, but
So this song that Lexy doesn't like the name of anymore is a song about some of the elements of like how we fell in love and got married. And there's a funny story in the middle that maybe I'll explain. So let me know if you guys want us to do that, and we'll explain. Or also there's a song called "All of the Rooms That We Filled with Our Love." And that one is about making babies. People say that we
good
have
old-fashioned Christian way.
People say that we have a certain tension, like an electricity in the air during Bright Hearth.
I mean, I do really like you, but I just think this is just normal good marriage. I don't think this is like anything extra.
So you're saying it's electric.
It's electric.
There is electricity in the air, you guys. And that song is about it. It's about making babies, but it's a Christian song that wouldn't make your grandma blush. So there's nothing inappropriate in it.
Yeah.
Some people are probably going to be offended at the line where I said that you taught me how to burn. That's okay. It's true. It's biographically true. We were high school sweethearts, and when Paul said it's better to marry than to burn, I know what he meant by that, because she was a very attractive, like 18-year-old blonde girl, and I was like, let's get married like tomorrow. Let's do this. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy that. We'll put a link in the description. And if I may be so bold, one of my hopes, I would love to see this happen again, is to see the EP climb up the iTunes charts with Even Dragons. We hit the #1 spot on iTunes, which means people went and bought the album on iTunes, and it beat out all of these terrible Christian artists.
Taylor Swift?
Yes.
Did it even beat out Taylor Swift?
It
yeah.
even went on the all albums chart, not just Christian albums, all the way up to like the 20s or the teens. So if you can spare like $8 or something, go buy it on iTunes and see if you can help us push it up there and have good music beat out all the
not even
bad
like
stuff.
To pay you $8, but just because it's like it shows how quickly Christians could take over good culture.
Yeah.
Like, we're not a big group of people, us
No.
small Reformed Christian folk.
No, I mean,
it was shocking to me that day to see how much our people swayed iTunes.
Yeah, we got all the way up into the top on the main chart, beating Taylor Swift, Chris Stapleton, and that kind of thing. And that was just because I think, I probably sold Even Dragons on iTunes maybe 500 times. I don't know what it was. I haven't actually looked. But that's what did it. So if you're listening to this, I know thousands of people listen to this podcast. If some of you went and did that, it would, or just stream it, whatever would help. And I really do hope that you guys enjoy it, that it blesses your family and is just at least one stone's throw, like rock thrown against the enemy of bad Christian culture and cheap Christian culture. And I worked very hard on this, worked with some great musicians, Brandon B., my producer, Beth Whitney sang background vocals. Her husband, Aaron, played upright bass on the album. Emily Heimstra played viola. A bunch of, it wasn't just my efforts. This was a lot of really high-caliber Christian musicians with decades of experience coming and pouring into this project because we wanted it to be every bit as good as something you would listen to from Gregory Alan Isakov or Noah Gunderson or, whatever your favorite music is. So go listen to it. I calculated that if you didn't do any, if you guys who were listening, if you didn't do any work at work and just listen to my EP over and over, you could listen to it 16 to 20 times in your workday until you lost your job. So consider that.
Nice.
Not
an option.
Don't actually do that. Don't do that. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Any last words, babe, before we sign off? Nope. Alfie is now asleep. So he has fussed himself to sleep.
He did not. Yeah.
And he was tired. That was the thing.
He was trying. We paused. I went to give him a nice warm bath. And as soon as I put him in the warm water, he put his hand in his mouth, and he tried to go to sleep. So I knew he was getting close to bedtime.
He's like, let's do this. All right, guys. Well, thanks. And if you like Bright Hearth and you'd like to support the show, we have a Patreon channel where we release an additional episode every week or so called In the Kitchen, where we do a lot of granular, practical stuff. Lexi just actually did one on fertility and chart tracking tools, and a tool that she uses there. All kinds of resources across the board, recipes, tons of stuff. And we hope that we give you some good benefits for signing up to help us continue to make this show possible and put the time and everything into it. So thanks, you guys, for listening. We hope that you were blessed by this episode of Bright Hearth and that you'll share it with your friends. And we'll catch you next time.